All right. Thank you very much. I wondered who is that at West Africa. You're right, there are different entities. So just for clarity, so for those who've joined, thank you. I'll try just to, in summary way, as I've been introduced, a product manager. I've been doing this for a while. So today we're just gonna be talking about stakeholder management, and I'll try to engage us from a point of, if you can put in the chat what your expectations are from the session, what comes to your mind when you think of stakeholders, what are the challenges. So if you can just engage me in the chat, I can use that to also build us on the presentation. I like doing this so that at the end of the session, then we look at it from a point of, did I meet your expectations? And if I didn't meet, then probably it's a good point for feedback in future. So I'll just be checking in the chats. Really, I don't know, VB, you've taken it to another level. So the agenda of the session is stakeholder management, not how we become $1 billion company. So I won't address that, as I'm not senior enough to address that in Safaricom. So I'll try, if you can have our chats towards stakeholder management, I'll appreciate that, and not the billions of profits. Maybe in another life I would be empowered to address that. So if you can just put in the chat what your expectations are as we kick off, then yeah, it will help me to also make sure that I center and adapt the conversation as we proceed, in such a way that it brings value to your expectations at the end of this. So yeah, thank you for joining once again for those who are joining. So this is one of those big monsters that we have, and I'll just try to start with this. I thought of starting with this slide to sort of bring out. I just thought of some of these things randomly in my head. What are some of these challenges when you think of stakeholder management? And you can use the chat to give me a lot more if you think something is not covered. So I just highlighted some of those experiences or challenges that people get to go through from whether you're doing product management. And I want to emphasize that stakeholder management is not just for product managers. I think in every role that you're doing from time to time, you will always be handling an aspect of managing stakeholders. Your boss is a stakeholder. Your peer, your colleagues, those are stakeholders. If people are accountable to you, those are stakeholders. I don't know, there are different types of stakeholders. So how do you interface with them? Other support or business units that you work with, they are also stakeholders. So how do you manage it? So I know it's a session for product managers, but I think this is something that you constantly do every day in our jobs, whether you know it or not. And how do you make sure that works out? So some of the things that I pointed out in terms of these challenges is, and I'll not go into the details yet, but I'll just talk about them. So one of them is competing priorities between them. So again, stakeholders, they'll always be, everyone has a priority. You have a priority as a business, as an entity. So what are these priorities? And the competition tends to bring about some of those challenges that you experience from that perspective. Another challenge that also you'll see around this is, from your perspective, is how do you align the many different stakeholders? So aligning, making sure that they're all on the same page towards the objectives that you have. That is also one of the challenges. I also thought of resource constraints. So sometimes, again, it's from a point of resources are never enough. So how do you manage it and how do you handle that? Information hoarding. I think you must have experienced people who are selfish with information. And if we've met today for the first time, I'm very direct with my presentation. So yeah, how do you know? Do you know people who hoard information and they find power in hoarding? Hoarding here simply means you don't want to release information that you think someone can use and probably they'll be in a better position than you. So a bit of selfishness and all that comes in. You know you can help someone, but you don't want to help. So how do you manage stakeholders who hoard information? Communication breakdown is one of the big ones, and I think it plays a big role from a point of how do you manage communication. In our last session, I talked about over communicating, and I think some people are wondering if that's English, but I want to still defend it and stand by it, that over communicating is something that you can also ensure from a point of making sure that there's clarity of what is being mentioned. There's also clarity in terms of what are the clear objectives across. So is there communication breakdown and all that? Unfounded attitudes and fear. I think this is getting a bit of this is where it gets interesting. Some people just be uncomfortable from a point of their own personal bias and fears and complexities. Sometimes it just has nothing to do with you, and we'll talk about how to address this kind of thing. Sometimes you see someone react to you and you wonder what's going on with this one today, those kind of situations. So again, those are realities. Misaligned business priorities. This is also one of the big ones, because if your stakeholders are not working towards your priorities and vice versa, you tend to clash a lot, because then you feel like I'm not supporting you and you're not supporting me. So how do we make that work out? Indecision, sorry for that, whatever on the slide. So indecision is a big one. People who are just scared of making decisions, they will never actually commit. They are good at discussion but no commitment. So how do you handle indecision? Are you also a victim of that? That sometimes indecision is worse than even bad decision. So you'd rather make a bad decision very quickly, you pivot, because you get to learn from the mistakes that you've made and then be able to pivot and think of something else that is different. So again, indecision is big and it affects a lot of people, whether you're a product manager or whatever it is that you do. How do you make sure that you manage that? And then I also just picked about challenges about handling senior stakeholders, or people who outrank you, because again, that happens from time to time. At any given point, there's someone who is above you. So how do you manage that from a point of what you do? So I picked up some of these challenges. I don't know if you have any other in the chats. Just try to run through that in terms of expectations. If you're joining now, we'll avoid things to do with how we make billions of profits. How have you handled conflicting requirements from different stakeholders in your experience? So again, I'll get to address that. Thank you, Mary, for that. Marilyn, also tips for PMs to communicate and manage stakeholder expectations while working across with cross-functional teams. I love that. It's also something that you're going to look at. And then we'll be also trying to bring in how to manage investors pushing for profit through detrimental practices like hire more versus good versus doing good for the company. Again, very interesting. So I'll try to hold myself accountable to what you're putting in the chat. And if you have any other additional stuff that you want to put in, feel free to chat, and then I just keep checking in the chats to make sure that I make sure that the presentation addresses these expectations. So let me start with this, and I like this slide. I came across it this week. I like it because, oops, let me find where. Sorry for that. I need to find where. Yeah, okay, I'm back. Yeah, so I like this slide because it actually gives you an end-to-end when you think about it from a point of what you go through as a product manager, right from the vision, which is at the very strategy level, all the way to the tactics in terms of the execution of the product and the increments you're putting out in the market. So at any given point, what I've learned also from experience is stakeholders will always fall within this segment. So they'll always come in from a very vision strategy perspective or layer. And most of these times, some of these stakeholders will tend to be very senior guys because, I mean, you do know how organizations are structured. The senior guys will tend to drive the vision and the strategies. These are your CEOs, these are your chiefs or head of departments or general managers, depending on where you work. And then it starts to break down. So in between there, in terms of number 2, 3, like in terms of the product backlog, the roadmaps, you tend to deal with your peers, because then you're dealing with people who do the day-to-day work like yourself in terms of pushing and accountable for different initiatives. And then now towards the end, you're also now dealing with people accountable to you. So this could be your developers, etc., and all that. They all gives you a breakdown of what kind of stakeholders you're dealing with. And I'm trying to drive this conversation towards bringing out how something called stakeholder mapping, identifying your stakeholders and then mapping them. So you have to understand who is what, because then this breakdown, this slide will show you the level of influence or interest that a stakeholder has within your product, within the space that you're doing. So if you don't have that understanding, then sometimes you find you're using the wrong tactics to handle different stakeholders, and then you realize you're not achieving what you want to achieve. So how do you manage that? So I hope it gives clarity as we proceed. So this is a nice slide because it looks very high level and it's very clean, but then it gets chaotic. So I love this even more, and I love it because if again I was doing a session yesterday internally about what product management is all about. And I love this slide because it just shows you the chaos of a product manager. It's just to show you why some of them you can wonder if they are okay upstairs and all that, because this is the life. There's just so many moving parts, a lot of priorities and competing interests and problems and objectives, and there's a lot of so many moving parts in summary that need to be handled. And all these things, sometimes you find they're all in your head. You're trying to juggle in between, making sure that how am I dealing with the customers? We customers actually are one of the big stakeholders you can work with. How are you handling the internal the partners, external partners, guys you're integrating with, people you're actually working with, whether they're banks, etc., and all that. How are they being their interests being taken care of and all that internally, as your team, the development team, the UI UX designers, you're talking about the enterprise risk departments, guys who are there to make sure that the controls are in place from a compliance perspective, DevOps guys and all that, security guys, to make sure that at the end of the day that whatever you're doing, there's checks and balances to make sure that everything is being done in the right way. So all this again feed into forming what type of stakeholders you have. So when you look at this slide, what it just shows you is that the different problems you have and the different components of what you're doing as a product manager, it shows you that every component tends to expose you to a type of a stakeholder. Every segment, every journey, every experience, every part of the product or the season of the product comes with a different type of a stakeholder. So then it's more of asking yourself, are you aware of all this? And I'm trying to drive this conversation out to the next slide in terms of asking you one simple thing. Do you know your stakeholders as a product manager? And I want to also help people who are not into product management, but you're asking, how is this beneficial for me? Then it's as simple as, do you know your stakeholders, even as a developer, as someone who is doing UI UX design, as someone who is a CEO of a startup, as someone who is a manager or maybe a senior leader in a corporate? Do you know your stakeholders? Why? Because if you don't know them, that is normally the beginning of the problem of some of the challenges that people tend to face. And this is the dilemma that brings in about for a lot of product managers, because you're left in a scenario whereby you're not clear on where things are moving, where you're coming from, and where you're heading. And I'm just going to use the next slide then to show you from a point of the same thing I'm asking, who are your stakeholders? And this actually comes in different ways, and they come in different categories. So I'll just use this slide to show a bit of the stakeholders who are forming in terms of partners. There are those who are coming in terms of the users or the customers of your product. We have stakeholders who are coming in terms of, just the suppliers that you're working with. You have internal teams, the developers. I've talked about governance. Government becomes a big part, a big stakeholder, if you ask me, because of regulators, CBKs and the CAs and all that. Because if they say that you can't launch your product, then there's a high chance you're actually not going to be able to launch. You must have gone through that from from time to time, whereby you have a ready product, but then you can't just take it to market because you don't have CBK approval. I remember when I was working at the bank, it used to be a joke. I used to say that a lot of products that I had, they used to have a weekly status update, and at the end, they had this column of the status, and a lot of them had one same status that I would repeat every other week because of just not moving. And it used to be pending CBK approval to launch. So it gets a bit frustrating for those who are in banking. I always say again, I respect it because it can be frustrating. So you have already product, but then you cannot take it. So how do you manage that type of a stakeholder who is not internal? It's an external party, probably a government entity. And again, it doesn't matter who you are, because when they say you are not going to launch because maybe the KYC is not making sense, or you're not complying with a certain aspect, data protection and all that, then you're not going to be able to launch. How do you deal with those kind of scenarios? Again, interestingly, this diagram picks that influencers are also stakeholders. If you go on X or Twitter, or whatever it is, or IG or TikTok, I don't know where you go for these things, and the influencers that you like, they're actually now being incorporated in products as in stakeholders that you need to figure out how do you manage them. You see on Twitter, especially now for us, Safaricom, I think we're always being roasted about a lot of things, whether it's the network, whether it's M-Pesa. M-Pesa is down for 2 seconds. Some message has delayed for just 2 seconds. They're like, M-Pesa is down, you were trending and all that. And I'm like, yeah, that is still part of stakeholders, and they also need to be managed. How do you make sure that you're taking care of these kind of people? Because for them, they're looking at it from a point of, they have different interests. Maybe they are paid to mess up your brand. That also happens in the industry. Are you aware of this kind of scenarios? We have organizations now who pay influencers to be able to talk about their products. Again, I'm not into the influencer world, so I don't know how that works out. I'm not going to talk about it. But influencers are increasingly a big part of stakeholders, a component of the stakeholder management that you want to look at. And there are different failures that come from this in terms of product managers. How do you manage stakeholders and their development team? Do you want to merge them up during your sprint reviews? Do you bring your stakeholders into one place? Again, this is a very controversial topic. It's up to you to figure out what works for you. There are those who do that. There are those who don't do that. There are those who argue and say, during my sprint reviews, I bring my stakeholders, key ones I've identified, and I have them sit together with the team, because then they can be able to get feedback and review what has been delivered, the increment that is ready to go live. We get live feedback from them and those kind of things. While some people have argued and say that it's not the best practice, because when you constantly expose your stakeholders to your development team or the product team, they tend to dilute and they tend to be chaos, and sometimes the conversations just don't bring out value. Why? Because there's a lot of competing interests that start to come in. So again, it's up to you as a product person to figure out what is best, what is not. And I've seen scenarios of both. Again, allow me to keep using real life examples, because I don't like just giving a very high level textbook kind of experiences. I bring them also with what I've gone through from an experience perspective to bring it home. So also when I was working in the bank, we used to have this thing called, this was and iCube, for those who might know. It was some time back, almost now 3 years ago. Gosh, time flies. So we used to have something used to call lunch and learn. So lunch and learn, it simply used to mean every other Friday. Actually, it used to be on Fridays, if I'm not wrong. We'll come together and would have different squads. You come and present what you're doing. And then there used to be a thing where you'd invite a lot of external, by external, I mean other departments. So you'll invite people from legal, you'll invite people from risk, you'll invite people from, I don't know, finance and all that. Just a moment. Yeah. Sorry for that. So you invite people from different departments and all that, then you come and present, and then they get to give you feedback and all that. While it was amazing, some of them used to just be stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. There'll always be a finance guy who comes and they want to prove to you how you've not figured out and considered finance, or whatever people do in finance. I don't know, I'm not an into finance person. Or there'll always be a legal guy who comes and he's just talking of, be that as it may, have you considered the Data Protection Act, GDPR, or I don't know what, all those things. I'm like, man, what are you saying? Like, you're just showing, some stakeholders just come and they want to shine over to you. They want to show you that they know. So they're not adding value to your product. They're trying to use this as an opportunity to show you that they actually know their space. And like I said, different attitudes, different fears. People use this kind of opportunities to drive different agendas. So using this chance to be able to showcase and show people how you know your stuff, which is like, okay, fine, it's okay, but then you're wasting my time. So you as a product person need to be able to guard from those kind of stakeholders, because they are time wasters. They look like they add value. They talk the most in meetings, for instance. They tend to bring out and all that kind of things. But at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what am I getting from this kind of a stakeholder? You tend to realize that you're not getting much from it. So how do you make sure that you protect the team from that? And I always know, for devs, sometimes they're just like, man, what are we doing here? This is not adding value to us. So can we move on? Can we not have to meet these guys? So you find your backend guys trying to argue with your legal guy. I always say you failed as a product manager if that has to happen, because can you be the go between these two entities or these two crafts? Because sometimes they just don't communicate the same language. Your backend guy is talking about API services, your legal guy is talking about, I don't know what policy and what bill is going to pass and how it's going to affect the product. There's no handshake. So you are the person to figure out how to bring in that conversation and balance interests for both your team and also now this kind of external guys that you're dealing with. So I always say, when you think about it holistically, stakeholder or product stakeholder, these are guys who have influence and interest. So I want you to get these two things: the influence and the interest. So you will see that there's a matrix I'm going to show you in the next slide that just talks about from an influence perspective. So influence, you're talking about what kind of power or influence they have over your life, over your product and all that. And then this actually affects you even if you're not in products. There are people who have influence over your career, over your life. They have influence over your what you do, your job and all that. And then what kind of level of interest do they have in what you do? And there has to be a balance of both. So let me show you in the next slide how that comes from a point of balancing both the interest. So first I've talked about how you need to identify the stakeholders. and that is basically what you're calling stakeholder mapping. If you look at this next slide, because if you don't know them, number one, you can't be able to map them. So you need to identify them, know who they are, and then you having what you're calling the stakeholder influence map. So you want to make sure you understand who has influence, who has interest, who has both interest and influence, who has interest but has no influence over me, and who has influence but does not have interest. Again, we're going to see how that plays out, and I'll try as I do this. I want you to try figure out in terms of what you do. Can you position the people you interact with, and what kind of where will you place them in that quadrant of that matrix you're talking about in the power interest matrix? So quickly, I'll just move to that slide because it's a bit more elaborative. So the power interest matrix, and that's what I'm showing at the moment. So a bit of just if you can follow what I'm going to break down here. So if you look at the y-axis, you're talking about the power, which is now the influence, and then on the y-axis here, and then the x-axis, which is horizontal, you're talking about the interest. So at any given point, and this has been used largely, if you're starting a product, these are some of the things that you need to bring out very quickly, because it always makes a big difference to understand who is wasting your time and who is adding value to you. So I'll start with the hottest, and the hottest here is that top left. I don't know if that makes sense. Top right. So that is a quadrant that has this guy where we're saying manage closely. So that quadrant is very hot. Why? Because if you identify what kind of stakeholders fall under there, it means people in this category have a lot of interest in your product and what you're doing, and they have a lot of power. Now, a good example I've used before and I've said is your boss will most likely fall under this box of managing closely. Why? Because for guys in products, this is controversial. People say, "Oh, customer is the biggest stakeholder." Oh, I don't know what. Oh, the weather. I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion. From my experience, I tend to agree and really believe that your boss is actually one of the most critical stakeholders. Why? Because they are sponsors of your product. If they are not aligned with you and they're not aligned with what you're doing, there's a high chance that you're not going to succeed. Why? Because if they don't believe in what you're doing, who is representing your strategy at the top level? Those kind of situations. So those are people who will fall under the manage closely category because they have interest, meaning they're interested in what you're doing. And then they also have a lot of power. Power means they can wake up and say, "Yeah, this product is not going to proceed. Proceed, cut it, let's start something else." Those kind of situations. And these things happen. I don't know, in terms of what you do, you must have gone through this kind of experience. And this is interesting for me because I tend to face this kind of thing a lot, because sometimes you realize that your boss, when they wake up and say, "This is changing from tomorrow, this is what's going to be happening," actually, that is what is going to be happening. And then now you realize the other category. Yes, thank you, Mary Movie, saying that you also put customers under this quadrant, which is also amazing. Again, there are different reasons, depends on the type of customer, depend on the type of partner. So thanks, Mary. Yes, customers can also fall under this quadrant. I don't know if it's a quadrant. I'm not sure if I'm using the right English. I'm a product person, not an English person. But yes, customers can fall under here because they have power. What power do they have? They can fail to use your product. If they don't use your product, simply means your product has no traffic. And they have interest. Why? Because they're interested in what you're doing. Or rather, perceived interest or assumed interest. You have to validate that they actually have interest as you think that they have interest. So again, it's up to you to figure out where they fall. And then I want to see from the chart. I don't know if anyone can try guess for the other three. This is where it gets a bit controversial. Who are the people that you deal with that you think will fall under people that you need to keep satisfied, and those you need to monitor, and then those you keep informed? Monitor, let me start with that. It's the easy one. Those are probably, for lack of a better word, I don't want to say useless stakeholders, but people you're just like, yeah, they're there, but probably they don't add a lot of value, but you need them. So what they're saying is you need to monitor them very closely for various reasons. So again, I don't want to use examples because I might offend some people. I have observed this gets very sensitive. So it depends on your product. Number one, what kind of product are you handling? And then ask yourself, who are the people that don't have a lot of power and they don't have a lot of interest? So they probably just monitor them, make sure that they're in the loop of what you're doing, because you still need them. Some of these people can help you to drive the agenda of your product. Some of these people, you can use them. You know, those meetings before meetings, for those who've been in those scenarios, yeah, you can use them to actually something in terms of the power in numbers. You can have them, they buy in, they come to support you, and they're like, ah, by the way, yeah. So it can also help you to drive the agenda whereby sometimes you need some people, when you talk about indecision, some stakeholders will not decide things because they are like, why am I the only one deciding? But if I see like some other senior person has said, yeah, I agree with this, I agree with that, there tends to be that kind of comfort in numbers of saying, we are seeing where you're coming from and we want to support you. So we agree or disagree. But lately, in most cases, you find people who fall under managed closely. Sometimes them not deciding is just from a point of one, they probably don't know or they don't have the information that they need to have. And sometimes there's that fear of me approving simply means my signature is on that decision or that approval. So if something goes wrong, in most cases, you find people in organizations are held accountable in that perspective. So you want to make sure that you don't again expose them to a point whereby they're scared of saying, I'm okay with it, or maybe I'm approving. Um, Regulators, I think, sometimes will fall under still that same category of managing closely, because if you're working in banking, in telcos, whether it's CA or whether it's CBK, they tend to have a lot of power. And when there's CBK, of course, if CBK says no, you will do nothing. You will probably not be able to launch, and that is normally just the fact. So how do you manage that and all those kind of things? We have people who will fall under keeping informed. So this gives stakeholders, they have a lot of interest, yeah, but they are not powerful. I think they're the most interesting ones. So they're very interested in what you are doing, yeah, but they're not powerful. Maybe not funny, but your family members can also be part of this because they care about you. And I want to be like, yeah, because I tell my mother about what I do. Sometimes she doesn't understand what I'm saying, but I just tell her because she also tells me her stories. And sometimes I wonder, why do I care about? I don't know which mother did what, and I don't know, mothers and sons. The point is, your mother can be here. You can keep her informed. Whether sometimes she understands what you do or not, up to her, I don't know. But she has no power. Can she come and fight whoever is disturbing you at work? She cannot. But she's interested. Why? Because you're my child. I want to know what you do. So tell me, hey, how was the weekend? How did you? What have you launched? Sometimes she just sees. I remember sending her photos of launching one of the products we did a while back, and instead of being happy of what I've launched, the first thing she was like, "You've lost so much weight," and I'm like, "You've just seen the weight that I've lost. You've not seen the big thing that I've done." I'm like, "I can't assist this one." So those things happen. So you figure out who would fall under that category. So yeah, and then we have now lastly people who the other where you keep satisfied. So these guys have a lot of power, but they're not interested. I don't know if anyone wants to guess what kind of stakeholders that will be. As I just ran through the charts, yeah, it talks about Mary saying that you put this in the, yeah, customer in that quadrant. Maggie, I think you're referring to the mother scenario. You let her, something like that. Yeah. But very quickly, we have stakeholders who have a lot of power, but they're not interested. So again, I don't know what example to use. I don't want to conflict or maybe confuse guys, but you have to figure out probably guys from security. I don't know, cybersec. If you're in a corporate, for instance, I don't know if that will play that role, because if you look at them, they may not have a lot of interest in how the product works from a point of business and all that, but then they have power. What power do they have? They can say you're not complying, you have bugs on your app and all those kind of things. So that can help to address from a point of that they have power in the sense that they can shut down. So when you think of power, stakeholders who have power on your product, these are guys who are likely to shut you down. They're guys who are likely to say not approved and you will not launch. They're guys who are likely to say take this product down. That is a kind of power. They're likely to actually dictate even the markets that you go to. So that's kind of power you're talking about. If it is your career and you're doing career stakeholders mapping, who are the people who can actually mess up your career? A boss can actually mess up your career. So they have power in that sense. That kind of power that you're talking about, that their decision, if they make it in a way that does not favor you, then it's going to affect you in most of the cases negatively. And then you have also sometimes whereby their power can be very influential in a positive way. So they can make a decision that actually catapults you and like just projects you and just pushes you into a greater height, whether it's your career or the product. So that's how you want to look at it. But again, I want to task you, I'm not a career expert, but go do a careers stakeholders map, figure out who falls where. If you can do that, I mean, it's good. It helps you to manage and look at it from a point of who are the people who help me out. So I was having a conversation with a lady, she's senior to me and all that, and she was telling me that increasingly, actually, you need sponsors more than mentors. I don't know if it makes sense that you actually need more sponsors than mentors. So a sponsor is someone who can mention your name in a room. Sponsor can be your boss. They can sponsor your career. They can sponsor. They are sponsoring from a point of making sure that they're giving you the best opportunities and making sure that they're giving you the best platform and putting your name out. They're mentioning your name in a room whereby probably someone else cannot do that. So they are sponsoring and supporting you from that perspective. But then also, when you think of a mentor you'll meet maybe end of the week or whatever it is, they'll advise you, but probably they're not in a position to sponsor you. So they'll tell you how to navigate. But you've heard of people who talk about godfathers or whatever in organizations that this one is protected, those things, yeah. Don't pretend you don't know them. They do happen. So in those kind of cases, then you want to figure out, I don't know, I don't want to ask who's your godfather, but from a point of who are the senior people who can sponsor you? Who are the people that can mention your name in a room about an opportunity or an initiative when you're not there? And they'll say, I know this one, they can be able to do this. That kind of a scenario. So again, that can also fall in terms of figuring out who are the people who can sponsor you, because they get to have the power to encourage you and support you and actually open doors for you within the organizations and the industry that you work in. And may not have the same kind of experience, look at it from a point of now mentors. Maybe mentors empower you on the how, but these ones sometimes they'll just be like, hey, boss, do you want to do this? Fine, call this person. I've already talked to them. Proceed from here. That kind of a situation. So, in summary, what you want to look at here is figure out what is your map. Yeah, first identify. You have to start by identifying that these are the stakeholders. And think of it, when you think of it, think of from a product perspective. You want to look at it from end to end, big picture thinking, the way you can have like end to end architecture, high level, whatever it is. And then think of the experience from the beginning to the end. What are the touch points? What are the users? Who are the consumers, suppliers, and all that? And ask yourself, if this one was to disappear in the picture, will my product go down or not? If this one was to say no, will my product proceed or not? And those kind of things. So let me just again quickly look at the charts. They know, hey, good to see you here. A good guy, one of our backend developers. So where will you place suppliers and service providers in a product? So this is interesting. I don't know how to address this. It depends. It depends on the type of suppliers. Um, Service providers in a product. So let me use example of vendors, for instance. If you're working in an organization and you're having to work with a vendor, I now this gets very emotional. Vendors can mess you up, yeah. And I've been a vendor, I've been a consumer of vendor services, I've been on both sides. And let me tell you, vendors can take you home, yeah. If you know what I mean. I've gone on a PAP because of a vendor. So you a vendor over promises, and you become their face of the promises to the organization. And normally what happens with this is that increasingly you're the one defending them. So you get caught in between balancing what the vendor has promised and the expectations of the business. So it becomes a big challenge, yeah, from a point of if things go south, yeah, you are the one to be short. So this happens, and I'm telling you a real life scenario because a vendor messed me up big time, and this is back in the bank, and someone had to take accountability. Yeah, someone had to be held accountable for that. So normally, again, if you a product manager, when things are good, yeah, everyone is there. Yeah, this is our product. When they go south, you are always alone. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. So yeah, things going south, you find vendors in that case, then they will tend to fall under people who have a lot of power, but they don't have power, but they actually are very powerful. So like I said, they know I don't know exactly where to place it because it is not very clear. They tend to look like they don't have power, but you know the story with APIs, yeah? So an API is not working, they'll tell you, this thing will take this one, we are fixing in 1 hour. 2 weeks down the line, you're still working on the same stuff. And you're just like, oh my God. And you've overpromised. Every other week you're saying, yeah, it's tomorrow, we are launching tomorrow, and all that. That is power in itself, if you ask me, because the power to frustrate you is power. So they're not coming and be like, you're fired, they can't do that. But the power to frustrate you, I want to argue and say it is actually still a form of power, that they have power to make you have sleepless nights. That is power. So suppliers, vendors, they can fall in that category. I also worked for a startup where at some point, and I don't want to give details, um, I think our leader had promised big stuff and all that, and then I found myself as the face of the promises. Now, keeping the promises was very hard. So I realized that I was messing up people again for the organization that you're supplying the services to, because it's not working. So you're caught in between trying to juggle in supporting your how do you call it, your bosses from the startup world as a vendor, and then you're trying to support this corporate, and then you do realize that people's jobs and contracts and careers are always on the line with those kind of scenarios. So yes, they have a lot of power in that perspective. I hope I answer that a bit for you, Deno. Sema nimekutuma is a better. I don't know what that means from VB. Thank you, VB. You're very engaging, but I think some things I miss out some of your comments. Maggie has said, place Jesus in the top right column. Okay. I don't want to make this a church service, so I won't go into religion. People, I don't know. Let me, I get you, I'm a Christian, but let me not go into that. Yeah. So good, amazing. Again, those are now beliefs in terms of your faith and all that. Yes, you will say that whatever you believe in, the higher being or OTC can be as, hey, it's so weird calling Jesus a stakeholder. I don't know what, it sounds so wrong. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, could be a stakeholder. But again, I don't want to get into that. I'm not a pastor. This session was about product management and stakeholders. So yes, you can place them there because based on your faith, you can say, Jesus, you can bring me down or you can take me up. You know, they can get on Sunday and all that. Say hi to your neighbor, all those things. Say hi to your neighbor. I've said that if you have a neighbor right now. So yeah, I won't go into that. So my team is in a very, yes, similar situation, Maggie, I think because of a vendor. So again, I always say, if you're a vendor and I'm vouching for you, please know that my job is on the line. This is what I'm pushing, I think, of late in the industry. That sometimes because you're in school together, or maybe you know you from the past, I give you a contract or I push for you to get a contract because I believe you can do the job. You have a promise and then you under deliver. Normally, people who are recipients of those services are the ones who are always exposed. So again, that's how powerful vendors can be. Mungai asking, how do you manage the power interest matrix across different products? So this will vary. What I'll advise is, one, the power interest matrix has to be adaptable. It's a living matrix. Don't say that the power interest matrix you had in January is what you're going to be using in December. That is wrong for sure, because the product evolves, and as it evolves through the different phases from inception to investment to start now the rising, you know, that S curve of the growth, and then now to flattening out, you do realize that at every given point and season, there are different types of stakeholders that are going to come in and some will going to leave. So again, as that happens, for a good example is if you've done the what you call RCSA, the risk product risk assessment, self-assessment, how do you call it? The guy, this document we do from risk guys, self-assessment from risk. You identify your risk entities and then they figure out what are the risk points and the mitigations in place and the impact if it was to happen, likelihood, all those things. Yeah. If you think about it, you won't probably deal with those guys every other week because you probably might deal with them when you're starting a product. And that's what I've seen in most cases in my experience, that once you deal with them at the beginning, then it's up to you to figure out what features are you incrementing on what you're doing. And as that happens, then it's from a point of can we go back and say that you've introduced an extra scope, and because of that, I want you to assess again for this new scope or new feature or new journey. What is the risk implication? Do you have any risk introduced over and above what you'd already assessed? And if there's no risk entity, well and good. But if there is, then they want to make sure that are there mitigations in place for you to address that risk should lead in the likely or unlikely event that it occurs. What is the mitigations in place to address that? So yes, Mungai, that will have to evolve first across different seasons for the same product. And then again, for different products, you'll find that your matrix has to keep evolving. So the point is, have frequent check-ins. Yeah, when you meet someone new as a stakeholder, make sure you ask yourself, where do they fall? Are they important? Are they powerful? Are they just of interest? Are they noisemakers? And this is where you need to be very wise as a product person. You have to ask yourself, is this one a waste of my time? And there are many. I think when your product is doing well, you have so many stakeholders from what I've seen. And they will always want to tell you, have you considered AI? You know, have you considered, I don't know, ML? You know, have you seen what Google is doing? Oh, Gen AI, you know, all those things. They tend to be like, have all the ideas of what you have not done. And I'm like, interesting. So that is again up to you to make sure that you filter the noise, because stakeholders can be noisy. You are also a stakeholder to someone. Don't keep pointing fingers, because make sure you're pointing at yourself. Are you a useless stakeholder to someone? Am I a useless one? Do I make and drain other people that I support, or do I make their scope easier? So again, those things make sure you identify as you go on, because it helps you to, I always say that if you're gonna unmute to speak, please add value to the meeting. And I know it sounds very harsh, but sometimes you will have to have hard conversations with your stakeholders and be like, you know what? And these fights sometimes are necessary. I don't like fighting, but when it's necessary, you have to push back and be like, I don't. I remember there's a time I lost it so much. I remember telling someone, "This is my product." You can be so mad. You're like, "Who the hell are you? Do you know I'm coming from with this product?" So you've showed up today, and you want to show me how we are doing things the wrong way. So we get emotional sometimes, and sometimes you get very sometimes you are hurt because of comments, because some people just want to bring down the good work that your team is doing. So make sure you protect, but at the same time, don't overprotect to a point where you don't take feedback. You don't take, and you're not open to new ideas. There's always a slide of people always like, "Yeah, we are busy," but then you realize that maybe you're not considering a new perspective. And because it's a common thing that happens with product people, as time goes by, you tend to develop a tunnel vision on the product that you're working on. So how do you hold yourself accountable to make sure that you're still open to fresh ideas and all that? And that's why the whole conversation sometimes, again, it's an opinion where they say that some of the biggest and the greatest founders are not the people who are meant to scale those startups, or maybe they're not the guys who meant to scale the product. That you probably found it, start it, but then someone else is better positioned to come and scale it. And you can think about even the big tech. You will see some of these examples in terms of how it's happening. So that kind of being so stuck on it because you're like, this is my baby. I'm like, the product is probably a grown up, but you still think of it as a baby. You need someone else probably to just have a clear view and an unbiased opinion and view of what you're doing, because then it allows the product to grow, and you understand that as a product person the product sometimes becomes bigger than you. And as that happens, you need to be okay with that and be like, you know what, yeah, this is way beyond me, it's not just about me. And you'll find that sometimes a lot more stakeholders come in. Be open to that, don't be selfish because you think now we are doing well. How do you make sure that you also incorporate people? Because there's stakeholders who are selfish, they only show up when things are working. So try filter it, but again, you need them probably for scaling. Investors could also be type of stakeholders. How do you bring them in terms of showing value and scaling that out? So yeah, I VB is asking, in cryptocurrencies, very bad notion by regulators. How do you manage them? Drawing lessons from the bank. Um, yeah, man, I'm sorry. I want to send hugs. I don't know if VB is male or female. I'm not very sure. But receive hugs, number one, because I know how it is like pushing a concept or an innovation, because I was doing innovations for the bank. And I know how it is like pushing a new concept or a new innovation to a regulator, and they tend to feel like they don't get you. And what I learned with, I don't hope there's no one from CBK. If there is, I'm speaking on my own behalf and not Safaricom at this point. May the record show that. So what we picked from back then was that if the regulator does not understand what you're doing, the default answer is no. So we used to joke on how we'll send the whole, you can do CBK documents. They always ask like, yeah, send this, send this, send this, send this. Like all the documents that you need, all the way from the risk assessment, CTC, product paper, all that you send to the regulator. When they review, the answer is always no. And then they're like, fine, we've said no. So what is it you're talking about? Yeah, that happens. So it tends to affect a lot of people who are doing things that are different out of the ordinary. So I'll give a very practical example. So back then I was pushing WhatsApp banking, and there was that drama of Facebook and data and security, messages encrypted or not, and all that. So interestingly, what worked out is CBK never approved it, and it's one of the regrets I have in my product career life. But then we're able to launch WhatsApp banking for Tanzania, and then Rwanda. And interestingly, from a point of receiving the regulatory documents, their responses were very, within now 2 weeks, it was more like approved. Make sure you observe this, you proceed. And I was just like, oh my God. So fine, maybe Kenya is a bit advanced, or maybe our regulator is a bit stricter than these other markets. Again, arguable. But then you realize sometimes that the whole concept, and I don't want to go into that conversation of innovations and regulation. Ugh, I hate them in conferences. It's old news right now. How does regulators and innovation, gets very boring. If you are an event organizer, please organize different topics, not those ones. They're very annoying nowadays. It's been 5 years of the same topics. Guys folding legs. They're like, yeah, so in your opinion, thing. Sometimes it's a joke. Yeah. So maybe the point is, I don't know how to support you. And the answer is I don't know how to address it from a point of. I remember I used to explain, and they will push back and say, but if this data that is being transmitted, because it was a channel of WhatsApp, then you through APIs you've integrated to the core banking system. So you can come to WhatsApp and then you're having some sort of like a chat experience, conversational kind of experience, and interacting with your bank account. So you can check your balances, you can actually transfer funds, you can simply have a chat conversation and say, please send 10K to mom, something like that. If you're able to pick and be like, okay, fine, how much are you sending? 10,000 to who? Those kind of things and all that. So these kind of things, and yes, I've seen apps that does that. So what I'm talking about was a while back. So probably, yeah, I saw apps I think managed to bring that to life. So this conversation is a bit old, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, just for context. Yeah. So you do realize that we are fighting from a point of you're trying to explain how encryption works. And I remember breaking it down that when the data is encrypted, so the customer, it's secure. But then a regulator is telling you, but if that data was to get into the wrong hands, and I'm like, it's encrypted. I was like, no, but if it does, I'm like, you don't. The point of the fact is it's encrypted. So you have a lot of arguments from a point of you sometimes just don't connect. There's no handshake in terms of what you're explaining between yourself and a regulator. And when you push too much with our Gava people, they'll tend to prove a point to you. They're like, so you think you know very well. Okay, fine. They'll be like, okay, thank you very much. Then after that, you get an email saying, not approved. You are there stuck there for another 2 months, 3 months. Who is suffering? Yourself. So there's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of being wise on how you go about it. Sometimes it's as simple as asking your stakeholder, how can you guide me to be able to achieve the expectations that you have? And that's why if I were to use the next slide, um, yeah, I'll come back to this because I'm actually winding up. That when you think of stakeholder management, um, there's one thing that you cannot actually rule out, and there's something called it's just something I figured out again. That's just from experience that everyone has an interest. Yeah, think about it. Everyone has an interest of some sort, whatever it is. If you can identify that interest, then you start to understand how to manage and to get support from those stakeholders. A good example I always use is I think of someone from cybersecurity who needs to approve your app for it to be deployed to production. What is their interest? Their interest is make sure that they're bringing security to all the applications that are live in the market. Now, if you have bugs, if you have applications that are not making sense, like you have, complying to the bare minimum standards of security and all that, what are you exposing this stakeholder to? You are forcing them to be in a position whereby they probably have to approve a product or an app that has bugs. Now, when that happens and things go south and there's fraud and all that, who comes to be punished? They're likely to be exposed because who approved? I approved it as a security guy. How did it pass? Probably it didn't pass. So you do realize that the interest is actually getting very personal because I might go home if I don't take care of this. My job is on the line. So sometimes you find you go to a meeting and there's so much pushback and you wonder why is everyone so mad in this meeting and guys are fighting you so much and then you just start to realize that I always ask myself why. They call it the background conversation. You have to figure out what is being said in this meeting that is not being said with words. If you can start thinking along that line, I think that's the next level of stakeholder management. You get to see where someone is coming from. Some of them will never say no, but they'll never approve your stuff. How do you manage those kind of things? Have meetings before meetings. I always say that some of the decisions are not made in the meetings. Some of the decisions they are made before meetings. So if you need to align, lobby, call someone. What one of the things I would do is I'll just meet if it's a senior person, like, hey, do you have a minute? I wanted to just run this by you. I go present to them just themselves. They feel special. I have seen. They like that. You come, you go to another. By the time you bring them to a meeting, you have actually support. And all it takes is one senior guy to saying, I agree with this. This is an amazing idea. And then you realize that it just changes the mood of the room. Now, avoid shocking, especially senior stakeholders, avoid shocking them with your presentation first time when you show up in a meeting. If they're saying for the first time, there's a chance you get a lot of resistance from a point of, okay, who are you? What are you talking about? And those kind of things. So lobbying is a strategy that you can use. There's a way that it helps you to make sure that you have support even before meetings. And I'm just trying to highlight from my experience how to run meetings in a way that is effective when you have stakeholders in a meeting, whether it's physical, virtual, those kind of things. One of the things and concept that I also use is I will appreciate if some stakeholder says something, you ride on their points. As Maggie has said, I want to just build onto it. I'm not teaching you how to bribe stakeholders, but I'm telling you how um, it helps. It makes your work easier. You Because when you meet people, there's always two things. They're always wondering, should I trust you or not? Can I trust you or not? It's something that happens. Forget products. You meet a new person, there's always a thing of, can I trust you or not? And guards are always up. The guard people are guarded up and all that. But then as time goes, I'm like, you're not a danger to me. You're not bad. As that happens, people start lowering their guard. Stakeholders will always meet you the first time with their guard up. They actually look at you like, who are you? What have you come to present? Have you met me? Have you heard of me? Have you heard of what I've done in this organization? Those things happen because there's that pride of, if I say no, this is not going to work. So you want to ride on their vibes. You want to make sure that um, you're not making it at, and now I understand how bills get passed at 3 a.m. Yes, VB, that is very correct. Actually, these things happen. So you'll be surprised. Bills don't pass in parliament. Yeah, at least I can tell you that for a fact. They're not passing in parliament. There's a lot of lobbying that happens before parliament. So think of yourself. Do you have a bill that you want to pass as a product person or whatever it is that you do? How do you do that? My sister is a good stakeholder manager in our family. She's the last born, and let me use this analogy. She's the last born. We are four of us. I'm a firstborn. Yeah, you can be sure about it. She's the last one. But sometimes she drives agendas in the family and she'll call everyone. She'll call everyone. And there's a way she makes you see what she wants you to see. Very manipulative. Yeah, Gen Zs and all that. By the time it's coming and it's a family conversation, you're like, why are we all thinking along the same line? Then you realize that actually she's done the hard work. So you're not discussing an issue firsthand when you're all meeting in a family meeting, whatever it is. Why? Because of whatever. That is part of stakeholder management. Like I said, it's nothing to do with products. Product management and stakeholder management goes a long way in terms of even yourself as a human being. You're always dealing with stakeholders in your life. How do you manage them? People, do you trust them, and all that and all that? So yes, you can understand. Avoid showing up in meetings with slides that people are like, wow, share these things in advance. It's like, hey boss, I've been working on this. What are your thoughts on it? Can I get your guidance? Can I get your opinion on it? Trust me, it works magic. This guy will believe like, oh my god, you think highly of me, and probably you do. Maybe sometimes you don't. I don't know. But the point here is you want to bring them into the context, because with senior stakeholders, from what I've seen, they don't like being put on spot. I don't want to be seen like I don't know. And especially it happens a lot with the generation, Gen Zs coming to millennials. You can be a bit scary because you're like, yeah, AI, Gen AI, whatever, those things, NLPs, and I don't know what. So we're using this model to do what. I'm like, oh, someone who is more experienced than you and they've worked longer, they just like, now you're about to embarrass me and I'm very experienced. So how do you manage those kind of situations? So the point is, stop putting them in a point whereby they feel like have to be defensive, because the moment someone goes in a defensive mode as a stakeholder, then it works against you. What you want is friends in a meeting, and that's why the lobbying of the bills happens. And I'm not just saying that you go now bribing people. I didn't say that, but the point is, show them value. By the time they're coming to a meeting, they're actually very clear on what you're talking about. I once notice also, when there's a time I did a presentation. I think I was 24. I was giving this example yesterday. It was some guys from AP Insurance. This is a while back. Trust me, I'm old. And I came. My CEO was supposed to come with me. The startup I used to work with. Then he bailed out on me the last minute. So I showed up alone in a meeting, and I'm alone. Trust me. At 24, you actually, you're young in your career. You just probably graduated 2 years ago. So I show up, and then he tells me, "You proceed. I'm coming." You know that they can lie to you, and you're like, "Okay, fine. I want to make it in life. Let me do this. I'm in charge. I can do it." Show up, and then I meet some people. I think they're like seven of them or something. Suits. You know how guys in insurance dress up and all that. So I'm there, and I had a bow tie. I don't know. I used to wear bow ties. I used to think they make me sound smarter than I am. It's research. It has proven. Go try it. I think it helps. People, you confuse people by the time they're figuring out you're dumb. The bow tie has helped you in a way. Anyway, up to you. I'm not a designer in terms of how you need to dress up. So the point is, I show up, and then present, whatever, all those things. I finish, but then when I finish presenting, there's only one thing that their senior, their leader or their CEO, I don't know, I can't remember their rank. It was like, what did you do in school, and when did you graduate? So it hurt me so much because I'm like, of all the things I've talked about, what have you picked? You're asking me what I did in school. So they never addressed what I was talking about. But some of the mistakes I realized I did in that meeting was trying to show them how I know stuff. I'm better, I'm more experienced. Not experienced, but more like I'm the young guy, we're the young blood. I always tell my Gen Zs in my life that if you guys think you're the most dramatic and revolutionary and you're changing life and all that, we laid down the foundation for you guys because people in our generation, some of us millennials have been fired, you've gone through whatever. And probably we were the first ones to shock the older generation on how some things can be done different and all that. So you are be appreciating us, buy us lunch, and you're riding on some of our fruits of labor and sweat and blood. So the meeting ended, and of course, I felt so bad. It broke me. I always tell this story because I think it is one of those points where you bounce back and you're like, you know what? I'll come back for you guys again. So I remember leaving. It was actually in Westlands, yeah. So I left and went and ate a lot of pineapples. A lot of those ones they cut in the street. And you're just like, yeah, give me ongeza at 20, that kind of thing. So he just kept giving me from bow, and I think I spent like 200 bob. I don't know if I ate a whole full pineapple or two, I can't remember. But I just had a lot of pineapples out of anger and I was mad and all that and went home. But the lessons you pick from this is you're gonna meet senior stakeholders a lot of times. You're going to be present, especially if you need approval, budget, and all that. You're talking to people who are older than you. How do you make sure you don't come out like you're making them feel intimidated? Because the moment you mention things like Gen AI and all that, already you're intimidating. Yeah. There's a generation that is not very familiar with that space. So how do you support them? How do you make sure that you're talking about complex things in a way that does not make them go into defensive mode? Because the moment they do, they'll call you young blood, before they start talking, and they tell you, no, we used to be young. You know how they talk. Yeah, if you've been there, you know. So avoid getting those kind of scenarios. So um, yeah, I hope it gives some bit of clarity on that. So yeah, I think I'm actually done with my slides. Let me finish with this one here, and then maybe we can take a bit of Q&A. Yeah, I'm very much in time. So yeah, there's a model away from the interest power interest matrix. We have the Venn diagram. It's called the salience model. So it just looks at it from a point of how do you effectively manage your stakeholders. So it's more of theming them up. Look at them in terms of interest and what they do, and try to use that from a point of how can you combine them. So one example I use for a corporate like us is I tend to cluster all my stakeholders from enterprise risk um, together. So these are guys from data protection, guys from money laundering, AML, guys from cybersecurity, guys from revenue assurance. They quite a number of guys who fall under that category. So I put them in one meeting and then use, because they tend to ask the same things. And then you find that sometimes when the cybersecurity guy says it's okay, the data protection stakeholder will be okay. I don't know if you've seen those kind of scenarios. Like, if that one is okay, I'm okay. If that one doesn't give approval, I'm not sure if I can approve. So again, you need to learn how to play around with those kind of dynamics. That some stakeholders are not confident if another stakeholder has not approved. So find a way to theme them up, because you don't want to meet, I don't know how many, maybe 30 stakeholders every other day. That's why you don't know how to manage your time. I always say, if you're constantly in meetings, man, figure out how to manage your invite, your calendar, because then it simply means that you're not managing your intro very well. So you're always receiving meetings, you never set meetings. So how do you manage that? So you don't want to meet all these people one by one, explaining the same thing over and over. Can you try to bunch them up in terms of the similar interests? Guys who are looking at risk, put them together. Stakeholders who are looking at it from a revenue perspective, guys from finance, I don't know what, credit, etc., put them together, meet them, let them brainstorm. They find comfort in knowing that my colleague from a similar field has said it's okay, so they will also support you in that perspective. Partners external, if you want to put partners that you're using to ride on in terms of your distribution of your service, again, put them together. It tends to help, because then you're having the same conversation. There are people who do the same thing or similar stuff, so it makes it easier for you. Again, mapping is very important. So you can use this model from a point of how do I break down and theme my stakeholders. So figure out what are the themes. Risk can be a theme, revenue can be a theme, customer engagement can be a theme, I don't know, partners can be a theme. and then figure out how to cluster them in these themes, and then try to have these discussions from a theme perspective. So theme up your stakeholder management. I just made that up. Theme up your stakeholder management. Yeah. That way, then it's a best way of managing your time as opposed to meeting every other one person. If you get to a point you're like, I'm tired of these slides because you're always using the same slides to present to 30 people. And then they give you stress, and then you're like 30 emails you have to do and 30 approvals you have to seek. It can be too much. So figure out how to manage it from that perspective. Yeah. So I think that's what I wanted to talk about. I think I have less than 20 minutes to go for any Q&A that you might have. Let me just look at the chats again. PMing is a game of low-key seduction, professionally speaking. Lol. Yes, Emma, I see what you have done. Yes, thank you for bringing it back to professional terms. Yes, there's a bit of that seduction from a point of if I hate you, then I'm likely not to support you because I'm wondering what are you talking about. Yeah, maybe I'm not ready to be an MP. Political science. I don't think I don't know what political science classes are all about. But man, I guess that's a bit of a compliment. Yeah, eat pineapples, don't go drinking. Yes, Maggie. Yeah, sometimes you just need fruits to feel well. I think to your point, Maggie, again, stakeholders will make your life so hard. They'll make you cry. The times I get in the car and I lock the car before I drive off, I shout. I just shout. So even in traffic, this has happened. There's a time I was going home and my car is not tinted. Yeah, don't ask me why. So I think guys were just wondering because they can see me, my mouth is open, and they're like, of course they can't hear anything, but I'm just shouting, I'm just like letting it out. I'm like, I'm tired. Jesus, take me home, that kind of thing. So stakeholders can drive you to that point. So figure out what is your outlet because they come in different shape, sizes, attitudes, fears. Someone is actually scared. You do realize when people are going through stuff in their life, they don't pack those things when they come to meet you as stakeholders, whichever it is. They come with those things. Someone is going through a divorce, they will bring that to you. Someone is going through an issue with their siblings, they'll bring that to you. Someone is going through an issue with their parents, or brother, or a friend, or a boss, or whatever it is. People come with those issues. They don't leave them at home. And sometimes you're just a recipient. And that's why sometimes you wonder, why are you so crazy? Why are you so mad at me today? And it has nothing to do with you. Someone is just dealing with stuff. So figure out how to differentiate between someone who's just being letting it out on you and actually where there's a genuine kind of conversation that is coming out. But all in all, stakeholder management is something that is an art you learn, and it has a lot to do with psychology, understanding that everyone has an interest, may figure out that interest. And I always say that try to support stakeholders. Don't always be the guy who I need support. Find a way how can you support you also your stakeholders or other people within your space, because the more you support, you're building what you're calling a social capital. Then it gives you the power to next time the guy sees your email like, yeah, I know this guy, I can help him out, that kind of a thing. So be willing to help out because it also helps from a point of people are willing to help you when your turn comes. But don't always be the guy when they see your email, you're asking for support. They see your call, this guy is always being supported. How can you support? Sometimes show up at someone's desk and like, hey boss, yeah, what are you up to? What are you working on? How can I be of help? Simple as that. Trust me, it makes a big difference. Some of the things I've seen also is show genuine interest in someone's life. So probably you're in a meeting and then you can hear someone's child is crying in the background. I'm like, sometimes I've just stopped meeting. I'm like, hey, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, what's her name? They'll tell you, nice. Yeah, how old? Those kind of things. Suddenly you realize after that, someone's like, So how can I? It changes the mood automatically because someone is like, okay, fine, you're actually human. And those things, it's a way of disarming people. And you're not doing that from a bad place. But what I've seen, of course, first you have to be genuine. But what it does is sometimes people see the human side of it and make stakeholder management human from a point of someone is like, oh, by the way, you're actually a good guy. You're not as arrogant as you sound. So I can help you out. Again, those are things you can balance out in terms of just being interested in someone's life, because it makes it easier for them now to feel like they can support you. It's all about making rallying. How can you influence without structural power? I think that is something I came up with in a previous presentation. How can you influence without structural power? You're not a director, you're not a CEO and all that. But then how do you gain influence in an organization, whether it's a startup, industry, or whatever, corporate, etc.? How can you grow and have influence? And influence is nothing to do with saying approved or saying, make sure you do this by tomorrow. No. I called someone and they just having people rallying to support you. And I've grown in this space myself, and it's something that you never finish growing. I think it keeps happening from time to time. So yeah, I think let me stop there and then just give a chance to any Q&A if we have. Thank you, Margaret. I've seen what you said. Other tips on stakeholder buying other than avoiding shocking them. Oh, you're asking, sorry, if there are any other tips other than avoiding. Let me read this. Um, do you have any other tips on stakeholders buying other than avoiding shocking them? Yeah, of course. I've talked about lobbying, making sure that I don't try to avoid having them see your stuff the first time in a meeting. I think that is one of the big lessons I've had. If you can share the slides a week before, even on a Friday for a Monday meeting, I've seen it makes magic. And don't copy everyone. Again, that is also another problem. Some senior stakeholders just want to feel special. So you send me an email to ask my opinion. So you're not actually asking for approval. You're asking for insights as a senior person. How can you support me in this? What that tends to do is they feel like they are part of you. One of the biggest things you can achieve from a stakeholder management, what I've seen is you want to rally people to be a part of what you're doing. Let them own it. Let them feel like, you know what, we are together. I'm part of this. It makes a difference than when you always is like you're here and then these people are here. How can you make them own up what you're doing? And I'm talking from real life experience. I've seen there's a time even when you're doing a product in Safaricom, it's a year ago, and I had scenarios whereby I would get calls from random developers. They don't have to work with me, but they'll be like, "Hey man, I know what you're working on. I'm a backend guy. I do front end. I do Android. I want to support." And they'll plug in and they'll come and be like, "Yeah, yeah, let me also come in." And I'll be like, "You know what? It's okay. Come, 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 come." And what I noticed from that is that people also want to be appreciated. So how do you bring out that vibe? How do you appreciate people, the effort they're putting and all that? It is part of stakeholder management. So lastly, on the same point, Margaret, don't always use your boss to manage stakeholders. I think it's stupid. Let me just say it. Don't always use your boss to manage stakeholders. I don't always say like my boss will say it. You look really like you're lost. You look like, they for boys used to come and be like daddy of myself. When you're growing up and you're like when you say daddy or my father, and we will have arguments about how my dad can beat your dad. Guys will understand. There's a time we're obsessed with whose dad is more stronger than the other. Guys, avoid that, man. Don't be the guy who always comes with your boss and my boss and always is seeing your boss for things to move. If that is something you always do, you're doing it the wrong way. How about you influence without your boss? Can you work on that? If you can achieve that, then you actually take it to another level. Let your boss actually come in because of maybe just for the information. But if you have to CC your boss for guys from security to approve your app, mm, you're using power. If that power is not there, what happens? The next time you come without a boss, those guys will be laughing. They can approve something within an hour, but they'll tell you, this will take a week. We have a backlog of stuff. Let's catch up next week. You miss your deadlines, you miss your what, you get frustrated. So again, be smart about it. Don't always be the guy who uses authority to manage stakeholders. It's not, it works in the short term. You look like you are a, badass, sorry, guy. People fear you. That one, hey, that one, if you offend him, the boss is bad, those kind of things. You know how it goes. But then eventually you have a tag of someone who actually you're not respected, honestly. People will be like, that one always comes with, escalation. So don't manage stakeholders by escalations. Try to call people. Sometimes don't do emails, just call someone. It's like, hey, boss, you want to catch up over lunch, those kind of things. Trust me, it makes a big difference. Sometimes you go and eat with someone lunch, and after that, you're like, so why you always hard on me? And you even laugh about it. After that, they're there even calling you. What else can I approve on your side? What else can I support you? It's an art. Learn, figure it out, constantly seek feedback, and just figure out how you're doing this. So, yeah, let me stop there. Stakeholder management is something that never stops, but I hope you get something from it. Yes, Emma, influencing without power is actually it's a thing that sometimes you don't have the power, structural power in the organization. Yeah, but how can you drive influence and influence people towards supporting your product goals and what you're doing? That does not just have to be about product, it can be about anything else. So yeah, it's something that you can grow in. Shall I stop there and just allow any Q&A if you have? Yeah, and if none, I think I'll give you back 15 minutes. Anyone, please unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much indeed. I don't know whether Emma is back. Is he back ready? Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
my laptop was running out of charge and I just forgot to manage it as a stakeholder. The office, I didn't know. Yeah, sorry about that. And thanks for staying. That's very kind of you guys. I thought I'll find people going. Yeah, I think Isaiah was asking something.
Yeah. So, Evan, thanks so much for this. I mean, I never saw it that way. I mean, it is very, very nice. I mean, that is quite detailed. My question is because I also develop products, and one of my stakeholders is the regulator.
Mm,
And there are situations where, when you work for a certain organization, that stakeholder management between the company and the regulator is managed by the CEO,
mm.
not you, by the CEO. One, how do you manage in such a way that you don't give pressure? Because at the end of the day, sometimes even securing meetings with the regulator is not a one-day thing. And then number two, there's this case where we've always asked, where between developing a product, then you take to the regulator to approve, and vis-a-vis giving a product idea, I mean, taking a product proposal or a product idea proposal to the regulator, then you develop upon approval. Which one should come first, or which is the best way? Because several times going to the regulator with just an idea proposal, they're like, I mean, what do you give us a demo? What we need to get something tested. Give us more detail. Then on the other side, you find a situation where you've put a lot of effort, taken the product when it is ready to the regulator, and then they say no. Unfortunately, I mean, we can't approve. So you find that on the other side, you've also wasted resources. How would you approach that angle? I mean, in regard to that, on one end, you don't want to waste resources. On the other end, they ask you for a demo. Thank you.
All right. First of all, hugs, Isaiah. I think you're frustrated, and I relate. I can tell from the way you're putting it out. Yeah, these things happen. I think receive encouragement. So yeah, to what you're asking on a serious note, what I've seen cases whereby your seniority actually matters sometimes when you're dealing with a regulator. From a point of sometimes I've gone to a CBK meeting and then they'll ask me, who are we expecting? I'm like, am I a cow? I'm here. And what you get is they're expecting someone senior. They're expecting someone who looks like a director because I was told I don't look like a director. They want more, and it's just from a point of where is your CEO or where is your director? The titles, they want to see the titles because they believe that is what is respectable and all those kind of things. But you're there as a product guy, so it varies. What I've learned is if you can take advantage. What you used to see at the bank is I stopped going for CBK meetings, whether virtual or not. I stopped doing them with myself. I mean, I stopped doing for those meetings alone or with people, my peers. I always made sure that probably I'll pull in our CEO. Then all they need is actually to do the opening remarks. That's what I noticed. They just need to do the opening remarks and then they'll chill because they're too busy. They have so much. And sometimes they'll just be there to give closing remarks. So it used to make a difference in terms of who is in the meeting. And I've seen this. This is a problem. I think it's a culture problem, even in Kenya today, that people are very keen on who are you, and that's why for currently I do products for government and I see this a lot. There's a meeting I went with one of my UI UX lead, just the two of us, and we showed up. And then across the table, we had like, I think 15 people from a county that I want to mention because some of you might be coming from that county and then you'll hate me. And then, yeah. And so we walk in and we had Safaricom t-shirts. We just like, we were branded that day. I don't even know why. It's so weird. So we show up and then they're asking us, so where's the rest of your team? And you're like, what do you mean? We are the team. We've come from Nairobi. And it went south from there. So my meeting started on a negative. So I had to work extra harder to convince them that, you know what, just the two of us can manage 15 of you across the table. The problem with the culture is senior people want to see senior counterparts because somehow they believe they are respected, number one. I've seen cases whereby when you show up for a meeting, how you have dressed up is a big deal. There's a friend of mine who went for a meeting in Mombasa. You know, there you go to Mombasa and then you show up in a meeting feeling, the Nairobi guy is feeling, yeah, we're in Coastal. So he didn't show up in a suit because, I mean, it's always hot for us, yeah? They chased him away. They told him he was disrespectful. And the guys were meeting, they're like, because you Nairobi people, when you come here, you think us, you're on holiday. This is our life. We live. This is us living every day. What I've learned from all these things is some of these things, they look very small in terms of who you go for a meeting with, in terms of how you shop in a meeting. I had to figure out get suits, get ties, official shoes, all those things because of doing products for government. And you just have to adapt some of these things. So from that perspective, if you can ride with a senior person, especially CEOs, people who have director roles or chief or general managers, it makes a big difference. And I've seen firsthand. Avoid going to regulators, for instance, with just you as a product person, because there's a high chance you'll find like maybe they have a director of banking supervision from what I've seen. That is a director. Directors tend to want to meet another director. Unless you are a director of products, well and good. But if you're just a product manager, or that is your title, or whatever, lead product manager, you will tend to get resistance from that perspective. Someone doesn't feel respected enough, so they wonder, why should I pay attention to you? And who are you, in fact? And sometimes you'll find they'll walk out of a meeting and they leave the meeting to junior people because they feel like, I'll do a meeting when you have someone who is a peer to me. So that's number one. And then the whole conversation of how do you balance between to what extent do you show the product to the regulators? I don't have a direct answer to this, and I've been caught up in both scenarios whereby you are wondering, do I develop and then go showcase something that is an MVP that is ready to launch? And then they shoot it down because they will likely shoot it down. And I've seen, it's interesting when you show up with a product that is almost ready, they feel disrespected from what again I've seen. Why? Because they're like, who gave you the audacity to develop to this point? Yeah. Why are you showing up to us with something that is almost ready to launch? So they want to prove to you that, you know what, next time you need to consult us. So they have the culture of saying, come and think with us. And that's what you've heard of those things about sandboxes and all that. I'm like, oh, these things sound so nice in meetings and in boardrooms. You've launched a sandbox and all that. But the reality is, guys, sometimes it's just big talk, and our industry is full of that. And no one is willing to say these things. I'm going to say them because no one is saying them. And people need to have, these are real conversations that are affecting the sanity of product managers. And I'm trying to be an advocate of product managers. These things sometimes are not working. So who can support, who can push back on these conversations? Do I bring Figma, for instance, which is actually something that can work with the UI UX team, work on Figma files, Figma UI. If you don't know Figma, I'm just talking about, if you can just think of UI, no code, nothing, just the designs of the concept you're doing, come and present. You can link Figma and all the journeys and the experience. Sometimes I've done Figma and you're like, people excited, they're like, so when are we launching? Can we launch next week? I'm like, yo, it's Figma. So they don't even know that it's actually Figma. Again, welcome to Stakeholder Management. How do you not laugh about that? Yeah, and be humble and be like, I'm changing the world. Yeah, so the point is we need to have this kind of opportunities whereby Figma, because you see, when you have Figma, you've used less effort, technical effort. Yeah, so you're not spending developer and your resources and time doing something that is going to be trash and then it's stuck on UAT. I got caught up in a lot of that. So I don't know if I'm giving you an answer, but there has to be a balance. I sometimes I've had scenarios where I'll find after the meeting, I'll find for the guy who frustrated me the most in a CBK meeting, and I'll call them on the side. I'll find a way, look for LinkedIn, whatever, call them and ask them, how do you guys want us to proceed? Then they'll be like, boss, leave those guys alone. Now they're on your side. They're like, you know what, if you want to do this, you just send us the document and try to have maybe this journey, this journey, this journey. Take care of KYC. KYC is always big if you're doing CBK, how you handle your KYC and customer onboarding. If you can take care of that, normally they will always start with how you handling your KYC. It's always a starting point. And then proceed to things like, where is the customer? Who owns the customer? They loved asking that. Oh my God. I'm like, fine. If you say the bank owns the customer, well and good. If you say the startup that you're working with that owns the customer as a bank and through the partnership, they shoot you down because we don't know the startup. They're asking you, how long has the startup been running in play? How long has it been running? Share their financial statements for the last 5 years. I'm like, it's a startup. It started 2 years ago. There's no statements for 5 years. They use that to shoot you down. So those are the things that will tend to happen from those conversations. So my point from what I've seen is with those kind of regulator stakeholders, try to lobby, try to find out what is acceptable. Don't put in so much if you do not have approval. And sometimes make sure you confirm, do you actually need regulatory approval? I used to see sometimes we'll do what we just call informing CBK. You're not going to seek approval, you're just informing them. In that case, then it's not an approval. They just confirm that, yes, we confirm, we've been informed us about this product and we're going to support it or something like that. So it's up to you again there's a lot of dynamics, but try make friends. With time, I learned that guys in CBK, I have now colleagues there, I have people who are working in CBK that are former colleagues. So those are relationships and networks you can ride on to guide you on what is the expectation of a regulator in terms of these products. How far is too far? So that you don't burn your fingers and resources doing so much to be shut down and you're stuck on UAT. And then at the same time, you don't come with something very shallow and they tell you it's not very clear. We don't know what you're talking about. Again, a lot of reading the room and then just figuring out how can it work out. So I hope I answer a bit of that. Don't go to CBK alone as a product guy. I've been there. I've been doing products for over 10 years, and trust me, I feel like I'm not senior enough to show up to CBK. They always look at people like us as know-it-alls. You're like, yeah, you're the ones here to show us how you think you know. Let's shoot you down, and then you'll come begging for our mercy and come with your senior people. So I say culture, you can't ignore it in products. You have a way of, find a way to consider that culture is going to be affecting how people respond to you, how the senior people in our society look at you, especially. And I don't know why, but I've always been presenting to people way older than me, people who are more experienced, people who know more, maybe in different fields, but it has always been the scenario. So how do you make sure that you don't lose them, respect them at the same time, make sure you're firm on what you're saying? Again, balancing act. If you're 2 years into the industry, I don't expect you to be where someone who has been doing this for 10 years is. Some of these things is a factor of time. So there's a process. Trust the process. People say sometimes process is fake, but there's a process, and sometimes some of these things come with time. As you do them more, as you get roasted a lot more, as you get burned your fingers and have some of the worst meetings of your career, you learn so much from it, and that's how you improve. Yeah, I hope I helped on that, Isaiah. Yeah, I don't know if there's any. Maybe a last one, because we are out of our time. I want to go home. I'm still in the office. Yeah. VB, I'll share my email address. Let me just put it here. Yeah, it's on the chat.
I mean, thanks, Evan. I mean, I've just realized we have been in the same swimming pool. I mean,
Sorry, the same? Okay, I think we lost
Evan,
Isaiah.
Evan, you wait for others to raise their question. My question is, how do you stop being emotional about a product?
Hey, things of products, don't take them to heart, brother. um, deal with your emotions, man. I always say, it's that thing my mother has told me. It's advice. She tends to advise me some of these things when I'm having a hard time. Don't take things to heart. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, these are things of the world. You know that song of "This world is not my home." We are passing by. Sounds funny, I don't know. But the reality is, stop taking things of the products to heart. I've done products that have just backfired. Yeah. And I've done products that have just been amazing. I've had stakeholders that have trashed me and made me feel like nothing, you know. There are those who've encouraged me. Make sure you don't take these things to heart. And I don't know what is your outlet as a product person. That is something you can figure out. Find an outlet. Don't outlet it on your team. I do cycling a lot. I use that to just let out. I go do so many KMs, and at the end of it, on Monday, I show up and I'm smiling like, hey, how are you doing? I didn't get your updates, those kind of things. Um, Stakeholders, don't take it personal from a point of people come with different emotions, and some people are just hurt in life, and hurt people tend to hurt others, even at work. They'll just be mean at you. People, people can be mean at you, they just throw you under the bus, and you're like, wow, that is very low of you to do. It will happen. So, how I also do it, I tend to lower expectations. This is very personal, not, you don't have to take it. I just tend to lower a bit of expectations, in terms of stakeholders, from a point of, don't think so highly of yourself in their life. You get that? Don't think so highly. Don't think you're so important. You know those things we say, like, this one is who he thinks he is or she is. Don't think so highly of yourself in their lives, because that is normally the beginning of the problem. Find a way to learn that humility, that actually people owe you nothing. That's a starting point, that they owe you nothing. They don't have to support you, and make peace with that. And sometimes I just like, sometimes we are more, you're on your own more than you think. It hurts, but that is a reality. You're on your own a lot more than you want to believe. It's part of life. So I'm not asking you to run solo, but figure out how to not. That's how you protect your heart. I don't know. For the Christians, you know that thing where they say, protect your heart, because from your heart flows the issues of life. Yeah, I used to read the Bible. It's a reality, because these things will weigh you down. And sometimes you find some of the saddest people in this industry I've met are product people. Because products will take you through proper character development. When they go south, product managers are the ones who are fired. It's never the developers. It's never, you don't know who. They come for the product people. And like I said in the beginning, I've been put on a PAP because of a product. I was fired from my first job because of a product. So if you think I know something I'm saying that is valuable, it's from problems. It's not wisdom. Problems. I've suffered enough. Yeah, but Jesus is Lord. Yeah. So try to protect your heart. It's never that serious. Do what you can. Sometimes it is just not good enough. Go home, say, you know what? I tried what I can. It's never good enough. Maybe it's good enough. Well, if it works out, be grateful about it. If it doesn't work out, you try again. Yeah, no one always has ups all the time. As I finished your point, I go watch Beckham. Is it Beckham? It's on Netflix. There's a story about David Beckham and his life and all that. What I learned from this is how history tells the story of these big names that you know of today. History tends to focus a lot on their highlights and their highs. They focus on when they won. I don't know which World Cup. I don't know which cups. I don't follow much of football and all that. They tend to focus on those highs. But then when you watch that series, it's a mini documentary, mini series or something. Go watch it. As a product person, go watch it. You will learn so much about suffering, because this career is about, there's this aspect of suffering that you need to figure out how to handle. What I learned from this is, there's so many laws that you don't get to know about when you think of David Beckham. You think of, the great David Beckham, but you don't get to understand how much he was trashed. You don't score a goal and the whole England hates you, and all those kind of things. You waking up and you're telling your wife and your kids, hey, we are moving to Italy, or I don't know where, tomorrow. I'm like, okay, fine. Your wife is supporting you. You go. You wake up. You're moving to America. Okay, fine, fine, fine. Oh, we are going to France. Those kind of things. And then it also shows how in the last stages, when he's, I think, now 38, I was emotional when I was watching this with someone. Actually, I was very teary, because he wakes up and then he realizes that he's a lot. He's very fatigued. That when he's playing with the young guys now, I think the Messis and the Mbappes who are starting else to come in as early 20s and all that. He says that he uses a lot more energy to keep up. He's more exhausted. In the morning, he wakes up and he's asking the wife, "Man, why am I always exhausted, even if I rest?" And then the wife was asking him, "Do you think it's time?" Those kind of things. I think it is a series I watched that helped me to understand how do you manage. You come, you have your highs, you have a peak. How do you make sure that you don't go low? And how do you make sure that, is it a new product you're picking, or is it a new what, to make sure that you again, when you're about to start flattening and going low, you have a new way of, picking up again, a new investment phase and picking up. I'm saying this because for him, after he retires, and I remember watching his last game on how he's retiring, he was crying as he was playing because it was just sad. He's like, oh my god, this is it, this is it. Yeah, this is it. I'm done here. And you see how he reinvents himself, buys a club. I don't know all those details. Go watch it out. I think it's a big life story, not just about football. And he reinvents himself, and then now he's hiring the likes of Macy's and I don't know who and all that. And I'm like, think of him as a product, and his life as football as a skill is a product. How do you know when you know that you're about to go down, whether you're exiting an organization or your product is actually maturing and all that? How do you reinvent yourself to pick up? Those are hard conversations you need to have with yourself as a product person, because the reality is, as a product manager, your career, products that you handle tend to define your career and your reputation and your brand. If they go south, that is exactly what is branded on you. We've seen people who take up products and their career breaking product because it just went south and someone needed to be held accountable. So that is what you're known. Oh, you're the guy who used to do that. Happens. They never remember most of the devs when it goes south. They'll always go for the product person because you are the face of it. So it's a tough job. It's all I'm saying. But find a way to not let these things go to your heart. Find an outlet, whether it's your family, friends, whatever it is, a sport you do. Find an outlet. Otherwise, you'll be a very miserable person. And I'm not saying I haven't. I've been there. Some of my colleagues are in the call as you speak. I've been there. I've hit rock bottom. Be vulnerable. If you are struggling, it's okay. Sometimes you're just weak and you're feeling bad and you're feeling sad. Don't be a robot. I hope Isaiah it helps because it's part of it. Stakeholders is just, it's a fancy name for dealing with energies in human beings. It can get crazy because people are complex. If you think you know someone, then you realize you didn't know them, and that gets crazy. So, yeah, I have to go home, guys. I'm starving. Can we finish? I'm still in the office. Man must suffer. Yeah?